Earlier this week, the United States announced a pause on the tariffs between the United States and China. They'd risen to 145% and 125% on the Chinese side. Now, this pause is only for the tariffs that were applied after April 2nd. So, and the reduction is to 10% after April 2nd. So previously, before April 2nd, the United States had imposed a 10% tariff on China generally for fentanyl and then doubled it again to 20%. So that leaves the United States with essentially a base rate of 30% on China, and with China having a base rate of 10% on the United States. Now there's also some additional carve-outs here. When it comes to steel, aluminum, cars, and auto parts, those tariffs are not affected. Those tariffs are still in place for the United States. Additionally, the United States did carve out electronics and essentially remove the tariffs on electronics, and that's because the United States is so dependent on China for electronics, and we can't really do without them without some major disruption on electronics. That's not to say this isn't a problem that can't be fixed over the long term, though. Then when it comes to China, they are imposing 10% tariffs on, that is their base rate. I don't know what's being exempted on the Chinese side. They're probably exempting whatever they need to exempt because they rely on the United States for lots of materials and supplies that go into their products that they add value to. And it was already being stated that China was not enforcing a lot of the tariffs on the products coming into China because there's a big problem with factories actually shutting down in China. There's plenty of video on the internet of factories shutting down because they couldn't get what they needed to the factories. The other thing that China was doing all along was denying that it was having any talks with the United States, even though the U.S. side, President Trump and Scott Bessent had mentioned that there had been talks. And indeed, there had been talks because the Chinese negotiators had been photographed, and it was published on Twitter and also on Zero Hedge of their negotiators having negotiations with the U.S. side. And the Chinese government actually wanted those photos taken down, but it didn't happen. So it's really besides the point. So that China was negotiating the entire time. And indeed, they had to be negotiating the entire time because China exports 5 times the value of products to the United States that the United States exports to China. So it's a 5-to-1 ratio, and China is entirely dependent on the U.S. market to purchase its goods. There are no other markets in the world that can absorb the amount of goods that the United States absorbs from China. And this is a problem for China. They've been trying to wean themselves off the United States for years, and they have done a little bit. But more importantly, this is really an opportunity for the United States to wean itself off China as a supplier and a producer of our products and get the products manufactured back here. Initially, when the United States embarked on this manufacturing products overseas, it was for lower value products, but China's worked all the way up the value chain so that now the United States exports products such as soybeans to China while they export semiconductors to us. Now, the model that the United States had in mind 20, 30 years ago was to manufacture the sophisticated high value added products in the United States, and countries like China would manufacture textiles or basic electronics. Well, that hasn't worked out. So here we are with a 90-day pause on tariffs. And keep in mind that a lot of the reason why we have this horrible trade deficit with China is because there are plenty of American products that just cannot be sold in China. There's all these non-tariff barriers that make it impossible to sell finished goods or finished products to China. If it's an industry that they want to dominate, they allow it to be manufactured over there. They partner with the companies, and then they eventually squeeze the U.S. companies or foreign companies out of the market by giving their own companies benefits and market advantages that they don't give to foreign companies. This is how China dominates and controls markets. And that is their goal. Their goal also is not profit, it's to control industries. And that's something they've done systematically for over 20 years now. And we've seen it unfold, and we've seen what the results are. So there will be this 90-day pause. And during this time, there's going to be lots of products that have already been shipped to foreign shipping zones where they don't pay the tariff until it moves out of the warehouse. All of this stuff will come out of warehouses. So it's really not going to affect consumers that much. There's also a lot of product in Canada that have been pre-shipped to Canada. Canadian warehouses that'll probably all be shipped also. But going forward, there will be more companies moving their production offshore from China. They'll have more time to move their production offshore from China. That's all, especially when it comes to the automotive industry for parts and things that are made in China. And I think this is something that has to happen if the United States is ever going to regain these industries. And it can't be done over an extended period of years, because if that's the case, these companies never actually move. They'll just stay in China. That's something that even though a company like Apple has reduced their dependence on China, they haven't really, and it's because they haven't really been pushed yet. So I would assume that some of the trade barriers will come down with China, and some of their markets will be more open to U.S. products, and there will still be significant tariffs on China, but it's probably going to have to be an easing process so that we can get out of Chinese suppliers and build our own suppliers back here. With some industries, there will also be suppliers moving to other countries. When it comes to textiles and electronics, a lot of that has moved to Vietnam already. But I would argue in the future, with a lot of automated factories, a lot of those processes can be done in the United States with a very small amount of labor, and we would have the entire supply chain right here. And lastly, one thing that China did on the same day that the announcement was made of the pause on tariffs is the Chinese central bank lowered its rates and lowered the capital requirements for its banks. And that is because China's economy is in real trouble and they're struggling. So they need lower rates. They need more capital in the markets. They need more investment in the markets to give their companies time to make it through this process. They're hoping they can make it through this process. But anyway, their economy is in dire straits, and so it's kind of an emergency situation. Anyway, if you like this kind of content, please give my video a like and please subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.